So, you want to play Dungeons & Dragons, but you have no idea where to start. Get it. It's hard. Don't worry though, that's exactly what today's minute is going to be on. So, do you have a minute to talk about Dungeons & Dragons? Greetings friends and welcome to another awesome Matt's Minutes. So, this one is actually one that I've come across in my own life as I've noticed that a lot of people are wanting to get into the great game of Dungeons & Dragons. And as someone who's been playing for a while, I thought, well, sure, let me give you a hand with that. Specifically, what I want to talk about today is character creation. How do you create a character? Or figure out what kind of character you want to play. To be a little bit more specific, we're not going to go through the character sheet. We're going to figure out the very basic part of figuring out what you want to play. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, do you like hitting things up close or range? Think a minute, think about that, because that's going to be a very important question. For those of you that answered you want to hit things up close, my next question is, do you want to be a tank that just takes a lot of hits? Do you want to do a bunch of damage? Or do you want to do both? Well, your answer on that question will determine which class might be best for you. For those of you that want to be a tank that just takes a bunch of damage, I would recommend a barbarian, a paladin, a fighter, possibly a cleric, possibly a druid, and possibly an artificer. For those of you that want to dish out a lot of damage quickly, I would recommend a fighter, paladin, hexblade warlock, it's a specific kind of warlock. A cleric would also be good, a monk, or a barbarian. For those of you that want to do both, I would recommend a barbarian, paladin, fighter, the main three for all of these. They're going to be great at dealing close range damage and taking a bunch of hits. A cleric would also be pretty good at both. So those would be my main recommendations. And I think an artificer could probably do both, but they're a little bit complicated to figure out how to use correctly because they can just do a bunch of stuff. So artificers are usually pretty hard to do, but fighters, paladins, barbarians usually are more straightforward. So if you're looking to deal close range damage and tank a bunch of hits, those are my recommendations. Now for those of you who answered ranged weapons, my next question is, do you want to hit them with a bow or magic? For those of you who answered bow, I would recommend possibly a fighter because they're good at pretty much everything, a ranger, a rogue, an artificer, possibly, a paladin, possibly if you're using a hand crossbow, or a bard, possibly. For those of you that answered magic, well, that's pretty simple. You could do a druid, a bard, a cleric, a sorcerer, a wizard, a warlock, or an artificer. All of these are pretty much magic users and would be pretty good at dealing damage at a ranged target. Now, did that answer your question as to what might be useful? Or do you have another set of questions? Well, we're going to do another exercise together in order to figure that out. This might also help you determine where you're going to put your numbers in your ability scores. So, in Dungeons & Dragons, you have 6 things that are important to your character. Strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go through each one to see, or I'm going to go through a series of questions, I guess, and go through which one fits your character the best. Do you want to be strong and have big hulking muscles? Or do you want to be quick on your feet and able to dodge most things that are coming at you? Next question. Do you want a lot of health and to be wearing a bunch of heavy armor? Or do you want to just dodge whatever's being thrown at you? Do you want a character that studies a lot and is really book smart? Or do you want a character that knows their way around the neighborhood, knows the back ways, and is really good at navigating through the forest, and is really good at perceiving things? Do you want a character that can talk their way out of any situation and might be the face of the party or a politician? Or do you just want to be the character that barrels their way through most situations and doesn't really care about hurting other people's feelings? I think these are great questions to ask yourself when building your character to determine what kind of character you want to be able to build. So answer those questions, and with your notes, then we're going to compare which characters you should look into depending on which ability score is most important to you. If you seem to be wanting more strength, causing more damage, and more piling through different characters, or I guess opponents, then strength is probably where you want to go. And I would recommend a fighter, a barbarian, a paladin, possibly a monk, but I feel like monks would do better in dexterity, but you could build a strength-based monk if you wanted to. If you prefer dexterity and just dodging everything that's coming at you, being really quick on your feet, able to dodge, I would recommend a fighter. If you're going to use like a finesse weapon like a rapier or a longbow or a hand crossbow, that'd be really good. A rogue, if you want to sneak around, cut some people up with your daggers, that'd be cool. A ranger, because they're really good in nature and perceiving things, and they're really good at ranged weapons. A bard can fill pretty much any role in the party, but having high dexterity on a bard is never a bad thing. And potentially maybe an artificer, maybe. Now, if tanking hits is your thing and you like being able to just take a bunch of hits and not really worry about it, and Constitution is what you're most invested in, I would suggest a barbarian because they have the highest hit die, a paladin because they also have high armor and can tank a lot of hits, possibly an artificer depending on what kind of artificer you're making. I don't know if I would recommend a fighter because I feel like fighters are really good at dealing damage and taking them and recovering hit points naturally. So I'm actually not going to say fighter for this one. For intelligence, well, that's pretty easy. A wizard or an artificer would probably be your best way to go because that is their spellcasting modifier, which means they're going to get more bonuses to their spells for having higher intelligence. Plus, wizards are typically, they like to read a lot of books and they carry a spell book with them. Artificers tinker a lot with machinery. So, yeah, that's why I would recommend intelligence for those two. For wisdom, you want characters that are going to be perceiving a lot of things. So a ranger is going to be really good. I believe that is their spellcasting modifier, like I mentioned earlier. So that's going to give them a lot of boost to their spells. A cleric is going to want to be pretty wise generally. A druid is also going to be a really good one to have high wisdom in since it's their modifier as well. Plus they're really good with nature as well, kind of like rangers. And honestly, a rogue having high wisdom and being able to perceive things is probably a pretty good bet. It'd be really interesting to have a bard with high wisdom too, but I wouldn't say it's required by any means. Then last, charisma. This is going to be, there's a lot of magic users that use charisma for their main, for their spellcasting modifier. So sorcerers, warlocks, bards, paladins, and whatever that fifth one is that I always forget. They are really going to benefit from having a high charisma. They're going to generally be the face of the party, the one that enjoys talking to people, trying to work situations out. Perhaps they are the ones interrogating people in the party and asking a bunch of questions. That's, having high charisma could work well for those characters as well. Alright, so hopefully that gave you enough to kind of figure out what kind of character you're wanting to build. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you would like to, I can do more D&D help videos on the channel. You just gotta let me know what you need help with in the comment section down below, or just say, hey, I like this, let's do more videos like it, So I'm more than willing to help you guys out. Just let me know what you're interested in. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. I'll see you in 2 weeks.